Our next guest grew up in a Christian home. In fact, her father was a missionary for many years on foreign fields. As a child, she was homeschooled, but as a teenager, she strayed from her faith. She ended up joining the Air Force for several years, and as an adult, she came back to her faith. We've invited her into the studio today to tell her own story. Here now is Anique Harper. Anique, it's always so much fun to sit down with somebody whose life has changed and find out what happened. And that's what we'd like to do right now with you. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you were born, how many brothers and sisters do you have, what it was like growing up at home for you?
I am 30 years old. I was born in Pasadena, Texas, and I have 3 siblings. I have 2 sisters, 1 brother. I grew up here until I was about 19, in the Texas area, basically. My dad traveled a lot. He was on the mission field a lot, I would say. We lived in a motor home. I remember living in a motor home for the majority of my childhood, and eventually we settled down in a house in Caldwell. My mother was somewhat detached growing up just because I think she struggled a lot with alcoholism. And my dad was busy and going to and fro trying to like support us. So it was difficult for him to actually see it. I think she kind of covered up a lot of stuff that we saw when we were kids. I think that my childhood was interesting. It wasn't necessarily normal. It was interesting in a good way for the majority of the time, and I guess my teenage years were more difficult than my younger childhood.
Why difficult?
Oh, it was just a struggle. I had my parents divorced when I was I'm not sure the age. It was definitely before I was a teenager, and that was very difficult. I felt definitely torn between my mom and my dad, and at that time my mom, things were coming to light. You know, you can only stuff things down so much before they start getting pushed up, and that's what happened. I started seeing my mom for who she was, and it was kind of difficult. And my dad also struggled with having 4 kids just thrown on him. It was really difficult for him, so he struggled in some ways raising us, but he did the best that he could. And honestly, having a child of my own now, which I do, I have a 1-year-old, I dealt with a lot of postpartum depression, and it was just 1 kid, and my dad had 4 thrown on him, so I really don't blame him for the things that he may or may not have done when we were younger, because he did what he could, and he did a really good job. So, yeah.
Would you say that you grew up in a religious family?
Yeah.
What was the religion part of your life?
Well,
tell us a little bit. Did you go to church?
I think when I was younger, I would call it religious, because I didn't quite understand my dad's relationship with God. And we grew up learning about God and knowing what religion was, I think, because we really hadn't made that choice for ourselves to follow God.
And what did you think religion was?
Church. Going to church, being a certain type of way, acting a certain type of way, doing a certain type of thing, and it all kind of revolved around what the people in the church thought. I always was trying to please other people. I've always been a giver, and that's kind of my heart, is to give and also to please. So when I was in church, I really kind of just wanted to be a part of something. And I remember one time, this is something that really hit me, is I faked falling down, and somebody put their hands on me and I faked it. And people just went right with it. And so that's what made me think, is this real? I was kind of doing my own little test and my own experiment, and that's kind of what happened. And then that's when doubt started seeding into my mind, like, okay, I don't know what this is about. I feel like I need to start making decisions. Like I started making decisions for myself without realizing it because I was seeing a whole bunch of things that hit me wrong. And I didn't know it, which was crazy because that's all I had known was religion, I guess. And really, I started noticing things even when I was younger, maybe 15 or 16. That's when I started really noticing stuff. And there were some things that just rubbed me the wrong way. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I thought of as Christians, or God. I just thought of it all as religion.
So by the time you were in your late teens, would you say that you considered yourself a Christian, or where was your faith at that, like 19, 20, 21? What was that like?
Well, that's an interesting story because I'm looking at my dad. So I had the seeds of, questioning religion and what it was about. I had those doubts that came into my mind a little bit. And around that time, around 18 or 19, I wasn't getting along with my dad. And I remember I was driving over to the house and I pulled over. He said something and I told him that I didn't believe in God, and it shocked him. I just remember him being shocked, and I remember him telling me, when you said that, it made me question my faith, and that's what made me a little more doubtful. I mean, not only is he overwhelmed with the family, and I mean, we're very crazy independent kids. We were doing crazy stuff, so I don't blame him. But it made me doubt God more too, because it was like, after what, 20, 25 years of being a missionary, one person says they don't believe in God, and then you doubt everything, and that kind of hit me, and that confirmed to me almost that, it must not be real, because I think that if he would have actually told me, okay, I understand that you're going through something right now. I love you. You're going to have to make your own decisions, but I'm always going to be here for you. I mean, he has done that for me. But if I would have heard that at that moment, I think it would have softened the blow, because all I was doing is I was spitting out for a reaction. I was waiting for something. I wanted to piss him off. That was what I was trying to do, and it worked. So, because it wasn't what he was expecting from me. And then that kind of planted more seeds in my heart, basically. And so from then on, I walked that way. I didn't believe in God, and I really liked it because I didn't have any accountability. I liked it because I could do whatever I wanted without any consequence.
You were an atheist, in other words.
I would say initially I was looking for other answers. And I didn't know it, but I would have called myself an agnostic/atheist. I liked the whole atheist idea because if there is no God and if there is no Satan or anything, there's literally no accountability, and you can live your life on this earth any way that you want, and that's what I liked so much about it. And I did. I lived my life any way that I wanted. And I said earlier, I liked the whole atheist idea because if there is no God and if there is no Satan or anything, there's literally no accountability, and you can live your life on this earth any way that you want, and that's what I liked so much about it. And I did. I lived my life any way that I wanted. And I said earlier, I liked the fact that there was no accountability and there was no consequences, but the truth is there were a lot of consequences.
So, and how did you live your life then after that? What were you like if we had met you at 21 or 22?
Well, I asked my dad before, I said, are you ready for this? I joined the military because I just really wanted to get out of Lake Jackson, Texas, which is where I had stayed for the last couple of years. I really wanted to get out of there. And I joined the military, and I started drinking, which is not not normal. It's pretty regular for anybody who's in the military. You just drink away. That's how you bond and build rapport with people. And it's kind of what, back in 2008, it was a morale booster. And I drank a lot. I got taken advantage of a lot. I did a lot of drunk driving. I always tell all my friends, I was stationed in Massachusetts for my first 3 years. I always say my 9 lives were left in Massachusetts. I do not know how I was still alive and how I stayed in the military. Because, I mean, there's just some crazy, crazy experiences that went down. And I think about it now, and I still to this day, I'm like, I really can't believe I'm alive because of that. So I basically did whatever I wanted. I did whatever I wanted. I had sex with whoever I wanted. I drank however, whenever. I drunk drove. I remember calling my dad one time. I had just broken up with this girl, and I was driving down the road and I was freaking out. This is the only time I've ever brought it up in front of him, because we never brought that up ever again before. But I was driving down the road and I was freaking out, and he was the only one I could call. And side note, he's always been my stability, even when, we were going through all that stuff. He was literally the only one that I could call, and he would always be there for me. And there was like no judgment whatsoever. And that was one thing that I always remember through those 10 years. So anyways, I remember I was drunk driving down the road, and I called him up and I was freaking out, and then a cop pulled me over, and he was like, okay, you need to calm down. And this cop came over, pulled me out of the car, told me to sober up a little bit, talked for me, asked for my number before he let me go, and then I drove off. And he knew clearly that I was really, really drunk. I mean, the whole car smelled like alcohol, and that was just one example of me living my life the way that I wanted to. And all my 9 lives were gone, like in Massachusetts.
So if we fast forward now to when did the Lord start dealing in your life, or when did the Lord start calling you, knocking on your door, and tell me a little bit about that. Tell us what happened.
Well, I kind of think that he's always been knocking on my door. I think that those 9 lives, that was God protecting me. I didn't see it that way then, but it happened when I had attempted my second suicide, because that's where all those consequences come from. I mean, doing whatever I wanted, and I did that for 10 years in the Air Force. Those consequences slowly piled up, and I became super depressed. And I was depressed before I had my child, and then after I had my child, I had a lot of postpartum depression. And I mean really, really bad. I didn't want to hold her. I didn't like her. I was mad at her because I didn't have my old life back. I couldn't party. I couldn't do what I wanted. And I still did what I wanted, but I was mad because now I had this responsibility, and I almost felt guilty for it a little bit. So I was super frustrated. The first time I tried to commit suicide, it was in the garage, and I closed everything and started my car. And the second time I was actually in a mental hospital, and I ripped the robes off they're almost like shoelace material on the side. I ripped the laces off, tied it around my neck. I don't remember any of this. Tied it around my neck and tried to hang myself on the door, which is really complicated. It doesn't work like that, but I really did try. The paperwork says that they cut off the lace that was the shoelace that was around my neck, and I was blue, and I don't remember any of it, but my dad came down and babysat me. He had to babysit me. I needed somebody that had to be there, which was super humiliating and embarrassing. And honestly, at that point, it didn't matter who was there. I just needed somebody, and my dad was the first person to come down. And he started ministering to me a little bit. He's always ministered to me, and sometimes
By ministering, talking to you about
praying. He's never had shame for what he stood for. He stood for God. I mean, he believes that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, that God the Trinity works for us and through us and with us, and that, you know, we have the power that God has. Like, we can ask him for that, and God can heal us. God can make us reborn. He can make us new again. He believes in the Word, the Bible, and he believes it as truth. He referred to it as a love letter to us, and I do believe that after reading it a lot. Like, I see now what he means. But so he always ministered in that sense. And at this point, I was just so dark. I call it the darkness. The darkness just sucked me in, and I felt like there was no way to get out of it. And I'm not that kind of person that likes to simmer in that stuff. I like solutions. I like finding answers to problems, and I just hadn't found answers. I mean, I was going to therapy. I was taking medicine. I was taking a lot of medicine. They diagnosed me as bipolar. They had diagnosed me as it was an emotional detachment disorder or something like that. I was on Latuda, Depakote. There were so many things that I was on that they had put me on. I was so dark, basically, and none of those things helped. I had been in therapy for the last 3 or 4 years because of other instances, because I always cared about what people thought too much, and that drove me down. And the darkness came from caring too much about what people thought, which in my mind I thought I didn't really care about it. But that was the selling point, in a sense, for me to try something new. So my dad, I remember being in my friend's house. It was on his birthday. When's your birthday? October 8th. It was October 8th is his birthday. And I remember sitting there, and I was at this point where I would try anything. I was like, I didn't really care. I didn't believe it necessarily, but I was like, I would try anything as long as I can say that I've done it. And if it doesn't work, whatever. At least I say I've tried everything to get out of this hole that I was in, because it was so deep, it was so dark, it was so devastating. I tried to kill myself, and I didn't remember it. And I didn't care about my daughter at that point. I didn't care about anybody else that I was affecting. I just wanted this pain to be over. That's all I could think about, you know, and I just get goosebumps thinking about that as well. And so I just sat there. My dad, you know, he asked me to get on my knees. I had 2 other friends that came. They put their hands on me, and I said the sinner's prayer, I think is what it's called. And it was like that, exactly how it should have been. And that's when I accepted Jesus into my heart. That's when I got saved. It was on my dad's birthday, in a house, on my knees. And when I was on my knees, it's kind of like it was a show of humility, because I was super prideful. And I was like, I want to try this, but on my terms, God. You know, I wanted to try it on my terms. And my dad asked me to get on my knees, and I was like, oh, in my mind, I'm like, I know what you're doing. This is a humbling experience, and I don't know if I like that. Like, you want to make me humble? Like, I don't want to do this. I like my pride. And and I remember crying. I was crying because I was really humbled, and I was willing to try anything new, and I was at that point where I was just desperate. I was desperate, and I mean, that was a big point.
And what happened after that? Did your life change, actually, or?
It did. It changed. I felt a lightness. I felt like my burdens were lifted. I felt like I had a chance, I guess. And I had suicidal thoughts after that, but I started going to a church, and there was very spiritual church. They were focused on prophetic. They were prophetic, and also they were a healing church. They just kind of sucked people in that were really messed up like me. They just kind of drew me in, and they were so loving and caring, but they also saw that there were things that I really needed to get rid of, that I needed to, the way that the pastor's son described it to me is there were things that needed to break apart inside of my heart and inside of my soul, and when it started to break up, then things started coming up that I needed to get rid of as well. And so, there was a suicidal spirit that I needed to get rid of. And I mean, it lifted, I mean, after they prayed, I stopped feeling that darkness. There were times in between that and, say, earlier this month, I think, that I still dealt with the darkness, and I can just say thank God that my dad was there. He was there exactly when he needed to be to help me get out of it, because I put myself back in situations where I became exposed to it. I exposed myself to situations that I allowed things to come back and affect me. And I see it now, hindsight, I see it. I'm like, okay, you put yourself in that position, that's your fault, like you did that. I started smoking weed again. I started hanging out with people who were very, I would say they were like wolves in sheep's clothing. They were, I would get high and watch a sermon with them. So, it was, my justification was, at least I'm trying, at least I'm trying. But I mean, they definitely drug me down that hole. And it's crazy how that works. Who would ever think that you'd find some friend that would be like, hey, you want to watch a sermon with me on the TV? Want to get high too? Satan knows your weaknesses, and that's what was happening. Sometimes.
What is your hope now for the future of your own life? Do you have any hopes or goals?
I do. I want to be strong for my daughter. I've been praying a lot that the people closest to me see God in me, and I do want to become a better person. I want my daughter to see me as a strong woman, and I think that the only way that I can do that is by walking in the path that God wants me to do. It's literally the only thing that's worked. I've tried a lot of things. I've tried therapy for 5 years. It's just, there's not too much else I could think of. I really can't think of anything else, because God's literally the only one. As long as I keep in line with what He wants me to do, I don't feel the darkness. There are things that try to sidetrack me, and I recognize them. And if I don't walk in His path, I don't recognize them. Or I allow myself, I want to be blinded by it, and I told myself, I was like, you have to change some of the things that you're doing. And one of them was, you can't allow men in your life that aren't supposed to be there just because you have physical desires that you want. And you can't allow people that are wearing a mask as a friend when you feel that gut instinct that really there's something else that they're trying to do, or they're trying to distract you from, like God. I told God I will keep my faith. That was another thing, because I struggled for the last year with my faith. Even though I did get saved, this whole year was my struggle. Faith is believing. And I really had a problem with that until this last time that my dad was with me. I've decided that I've committed. I will have faith with God, and I won't question Him anymore. I won't question His existence. And I've asked a lot of questions. I've asked my dad a lot of questions. Why do we have to read the Bible? Who cares about that? Why is that real? Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, and there are some people that can tell you, okay, well, it's a historic thing. It may or may not be true, and it wasn't really written by these people, or how can we justify that, blah, blah, all that stuff. The truth is like, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just having faith that this is God's word, and it's done me good. So how can I deny it? is kind of where I'm at.
What would you tell somebody that maybe going through something like you just went through and they don't have a father who might tell them about Jesus or lead them to God? What advice would you give that person going through something like you were just going through but doesn't have anybody to turn to? What would you tell that person?
It's so crazy because I can't think of my life without my dad. And there are people that are going through this that don't have that. I would say find somebody that is a strong person, a strong man or woman of God. Same sex, make sure that, I have my dad. So if it's your parent, sure, go to your parent. But if I didn't have my dad, I would find a strong woman of God to keep me on my side, on the target, on my goal, which is just to serve God and to allow Him to be your number one, and surround yourself with people who don't judge you and that love you, because you're going to make mistakes, you're going to mess up, and that's okay, but just keep trying to follow God and read His Word, pray, and praise and worship. And I think when you do all those things and you're doing it from your heart, your true genuine heart, and it's for nothing else except to follow God, then everything else falls into place. And then, if you pray for it, God will give it to you. So you pray, hey, God, give me somebody in my life that's going to really set me on your path. God will do it. He'll drop that person in your lap, literally. There's so many people that I've bumped into after I got saved that I started seeing I could tell. I couldn't tell before, but I could tell after I got saved that they were saved, and I would come up and I'd be like, are you saved? I know this is a weird question, kind of awkward, but are you saved? And they'd be like, yes, I am. And I'd be like, I could tell, you and you, right? And they were like, exactly. And they're like, we pray for you guys every day. It just blows my mind, because it's like the veil comes off of your eyes whenever you get saved and you allow God to do that kind of transformation with you. And it's a very subtle thing, because He's not like an earthquake, He's just a gentle knock, I guess. So, yeah.
Anique, we want to thank you for being here with us. It's such a pleasure to hear your story.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Mm-hmm.